Kia ora koutou, for Sarah Provine Toka Wingua. I'm really excited to introduce my incredible research colleagues today about our research into inquiry-based learning. I'd also just like to point out that we've got 2 of our participating centres here as well today, so we'll have to do some introductions after this, so it's pretty exciting. We're also doing this in a hybrid way, just to complicate things. So some of our research team are online today. So online we have got Jo Perry, Mary Liz Broadley, and also Fee McAlevey. Okay, and then I will just pass you on to introduce yourselves. Kia ora koutou.
Looking forward to some interesting discussions.
Tēnā rā tātou i te whānau he uri tēnei no te tautukura, ko ngā puhi ko ngā te hine a maru ngā iwi, ko iau i te reason, muri ora kia koutou.
So we're going to begin today with some pre-recorded slides from our colleagues online, and then we're going to finish today's presentation face to face.
Life in the 21st century is increasingly complex. Rapid technological advancements and global responses to sustainability are having a transformational impact on education in all sectors. These conversations are impacting on how we view childhood, learning, and our roles as kayako. Current literature suggests that the skills and dispositions required to navigate an increasingly complex world include developing creativity, communication, problem-solving skills, and global citizenship, amongst others. Developing these skills in response to real-world problems supports even the youngest of tamariki to understand their environment and their role in it. However, MacLeod and Giardiello argue that childhood must not be viewed as a preparation for the future, but that child should be situated as being present in their own place and time. Te whāriki aligns with this view, aspiring that all children become competent and confident learners and communicators, healthy in mind, body and spirit, secure in their sense of belonging and in the knowledge that they make a valued contribution to society.
Today we are presenting our current research exploring inquiry-based project learning in early childhood education in Aotearoa. There are multiple ways of describing this approach, including investigations, project work, inquiry, and in Reggio Emilia as progettazione, which translates as flexible learning. The wide range of terminology describing this approach is likely due to the myriad of influences that have shaped teachers' thinking. For the purpose of this research, we have created the term inquiry-based project learning as a broad term to encompass all of these approaches. Consistent across all these interpretations is the positioning of both tamariki and kayako as active participants in the learning process. This approach allows the time and space for tamariki to explore their local environments, discovering answers through collaboration as children represent, reflect on, and discuss their thinking. The emphasis this approach places on collaboration is particularly important, as this fosters intersubjectivity, the capacity to listen to others, and the ability to appreciate and accept diverse points of view. As such, inquiry-based project learning has the potential to simultaneously support the development of British localised curriculum in Aotearoa, whilst developing the skills, attitudes and dispositions critical for navigating the 21st
century.
whāriki has been recognised globally for its bicultural framework and the way it offers key principles for curriculum development without prescribing a particular approach. The ability for each setting to weave their own curriculum has given kayako and Aotearoa the autonomy to choose to incorporate inquiry-based learning into their teaching. The curriculum suggests that being curious, posing questions, developing new ideas, testing them, evaluating and linking them to previous knowledge and experience is how tamariki create meaning. The 5 learning strands all align with the principles of inquiry-based project learning. However, it is the well-being strand that is particularly relevant to this presentation. The strand emphasizes that tamariki should experience responsive environments that support the development of self-worth, identity, confidence, and enjoyment, together with emotional regulation and self-control. Further, Te Whāriki recognises that understanding who you are and where you come from assists tamariki to become grounded in who they are and, as a result, better equipped to navigate change. The 2 tenets of working theories and learning dispositions woven throughout Te Whāriki are both valued with inquiry-based learning approaches. Some of the reflective questions for kayako in the 2017 version of the curriculum also align closely with inquiry. For example, how might kayako create and model a culture of inquiry amongst children? And what opportunities exist for children to participate in longer-term projects that support the development of their working theories? What the curriculum does not provide is guidance on the pedagogical processes of initiating or sustaining inquiries with tamariki.
It could be the need for further guidance surrounding how to initiate and progress collaborative inquiries with tamariki that has led many early childhood kayako in Aotearoa to study the international discourse on this approach. It was in the 1980s that the work of the infant and toddler centres and preschools of Reggio Emilia became world-renowned for their social constructivist approach to education and captured the attention of early childhood kayako in this country. This approach positions children as citizens in their own right and aims to teach children what it is to live in a democracy. A key aspect of this approach are the long-term investigations tamariki and kayako engage in. The project approach, conceptualised by Katz and Chard, has been another key influence on teachers' thinking in this context. Whilst examining these ideas can have deep value for kayako, particularly in provoking them to reconceptualise their images of learning tamariki and the role of the kayako, it has also been argued that the potency of the international discourse could potentially overshadow localised theories, philosophies and approaches, and of particular importance, Indigenous voices and priorities. There is, in fact, a long history of inquiry and inquirers here in Aotearoa. This history begins with Māori as tangata whenua, who have been inquirers since the beginning of time. Māori trace their genealogies back to Tāne, the epigenic ancestor who went on a quest to find knowledge of how to live in the world. That feat set a precedent for the pursuit of knowledge and inquiry for subsequent generations. Thus, from a Māori worldview, whakapapa encompasses inquiry-based learning as people seek an understanding of their interconnected relationship with te taiao, the natural world, and how to nurture, strengthen, and honour those connections.
Kia ora koutou. I'm going to discuss the aims of the study. Whilst inquiry-based project learning is now an established approach in early childhood sector in Aotearoa, little research has been conducted on how this approach has been interpreted in the context, and in particular, how both international and localised theories and ideas about inquiry have shaped early childhood teachers' practices here. This research aimed to address this gap. It sought to understand more about the range of influences that have shaped how kayako work in this approach and what aspects of these influences have been impactful. The researchers also examined differing interpretations of inquiry-based learning play out in the classroom and what it means for children's learning. To follow on, we'll just talk about the study design. This project is underpinned by our bioecological and social-cultural theories, which recognise knowledge is constructed and is influenced by a complex web of contextual perspectives and associated histories. The methodological framework draws upon a narrative inquiry which supports the values we hold for the stories of the early childhood teachers and the communities collaborating in this research. Phase 1 comprised a qualitative questionnaire set out to all early childhood centres registered on the national database of ECE services. Phase 2 has involved working with a small number of purposefully selected services across Aotearoa. We aim to capture a diverse range of cultural and pedagogical perspectives across a range of geographical locations. We are currently immersed in this phase, but have so far completed data collection at 6 centres. At each setting, we have conducted a semi-structural interview with teaching teams and observed a current inquiry. We're in the midst of analysing these narratives.
So we're back to the real world now. So phase 1 findings with 63 early childhood centres that responded to phase 1. And within the questionnaire, so it was a survey questionnaire that was qualitative, and within the questionnaire we had a question on theoretical influences. And the settings talked about, with theoretical influences, the main influence being Reggio Emilia, the second one being predominantly project approach, and the third one was a small number of participants who just shared sort of aspects around inquiries that were immersed in Mātauranga Māori and Te whāriki and sociocultural theories. The values evident from an inquiry-based project learning approach share that's not really things that are unique to us within the teaching profession in New Zealand, but they bring about sort of the depth of how we're able to, through the inquiries, foster deep learning. And that's been seen to develop higher socio-emotional competencies and the metacognitive capabilities of children. So tamariki, agency, relationships, dispositions are all evident through those inquiry-based projects. And the inclusive nature of those is actually quite profound, because children are able to move in and out of projects as those projects progress and as their interests determine. Several challenges were identified from across the case study centres. And one of those sort of kept coming through, and that was about support for new team members. So if you've got new people joining your team who weren't familiar with inquiry-based project ways of doing and ways of being, some teams have developed specific frameworks and models that were there to support other new team members as they joined. Other challenges were not always knowing how to progress an inquiry over time. And I don't think that's dissimilar to teaching in general, but sometimes, you know, with those projects, it was about asking those questions as a team as well. Not always knowing the next steps, and again, we've got the similarities coming through, but those next steps, part of those were being discussed not only as a team, but with those children involved in those inquiries. And again, we've got similarities coming through that it's well known that our profession is time poor. So with sort of the impact of COVID and everything else as with inquiries, they've you know sort of suffered from issues just around how projects were documented and how they could be made more visible, but also challenges around teacher time and child ratio and resourcing. Some examples of when settings were asked to share examples of practice, and if anybody's interested, the next presentation is going to go on to share a centre working with the inquiry-based project approach. But what we were finding with general responses were the localised curriculum, and we've heard about that this morning from the first, from one of the presentations from the kindergarten, was very, very prominent in those inquiries. So it was almost that central sort of focus as well. So connecting to local place and making connections to bicultural practice that was naturally sort of embedded within those projects. So some preliminary findings are teachers are learning about inquiry predominantly through international materials. You know, we've got access to the world now, so those international materials, not only through attending workshops, are actually there online as well. But what's really striking from that is that centres are developing their own pedagogical approaches to support inquiry learning in their own contexts. So it's just, we've got that depth and we've got that meaning happening. And again, you know, current inquiries, we're here to celebrate Te whāriki. Again, you know, inquiries are just smothered, you know, in Te whāriki. That's part of what's happening as well, alongside place-based pedagogy. So, moving on.
5 more minutes.
Oh, goodness me, I'll quickly do it. So we've found that all 6 teaching teams have spent considerable time developing the pedagogical approaches, and there's some similarities and some differences. At each setting, a core group of kayako have been working together for several years, allowing for really deep pedagogical discussions, and that has shared sort of, you know, they've got those shared understandings as they're emerging. So again, that meaning's just moving through. Teaching teams have spent time on deciding theoretical ideas that underpin their own centre working theories. So that's been part of that. And they've developed pedagogical processes that have been sort of, you know, refined over times as well. So there's nothing static in any of that. They're changing things as they go. 2 settings with larger teams, Little Doves and Daisies, have developed clear guidelines which support kayako through the process of establishing inquiries and progressing those inquiries as well. And they found that, you know, such a framework really, really helps, not only in those teachers feeling that they've got a place in those inquiries, but, you know, the ongoing opportunities for tamariki as well. And again, sort of the international discourses have come into supporting their approaches alongside their own context. There we go. I will move on to religion.
So just to run through quickly some of the centres we've worked with. So all of the inquiries that we observed really had a connection to place in varying ways. So for example, we looked at Little Doves in Auckland, which had 2-year-olds looking into the curiosities of acorns. Daisies was an early childhood and education and care centre in Wellington, where they were looking into notions of community. And then we've got Little Pumpkins, who, when we visited them, were exploring children's working theories related to outer space. I'm going to talk a bit more about their process after this. This is an example from Toi Ohomai Centre in Tauranga, and so their overarching inquiry has been focused on local connection to local place for the last 3 years. And so more recently, the kayako and tamariki have been exploring their local pūrākau. So Helena, the head teacher, said that the local curriculum is really important to us. It's really important that children know where they come from and the stories of their place. And she gave an example of where the teachers had shared a pūrākau that didn't really relate to the area and the children weren't really interested, but when they ended up discussing Momo, children became really engaged. And we did have a little video, but Sarah just said, we'll skip that. So there's a little video. If you want to see it, I'm sure we can see it. You can play it through the slides. Yeah, and this is an example from Pakaranga Baptist Kindergarten. And so they've also been exploring connections to local place for several years. And children here had been theorising about the creatures that might live in the local estuary. And in response, the kayako introduced the pūrākau of Te Moko Ika a Hikuwaru, who was an 8-limbed taniwha, and who fell in love with Te Kopua Kai a Hiku, which is now known as a Pāmio Basin. And so this really captured the interest of one tamaiti, and they ended up making a plan to create the Te Moko Ika a Hikuwaru out of wood. And they worked really intensely to realise this plan, and they had this inquiry into this pūrākau that carried on over several weeks, and they ended up even making a stop motion film around it. So that was very quick.
Thank you, Rachel, you did that so well. Another centre that we worked with is Remu Kindergarten, it's a pseudonym, and they were beginning their journey with inquiry, and so they decided to do this by dedicating time every day to visit their local ngāhere. And what was really fascinating for two of us were in the centre researching was watching the children slow down through that opportunity to go to the same place every day. Over time, they became really familiar, they took on leadership roles, they took on the role of being kaitiakitanga, and they slowed down and began to use the visual arts particularly to draw pictures of the bush and the discoveries and take digital photographs as well. Right, discussion. So the inquiries we have observed have demonstrated how this approach supports tamariki to learn about how to work in a group, listen to each other, share ideas and work collaboratively to solve problems. As they engage in these inquiries, they are developing many of the skills and dispositions to navigate their lives and learning. We see that inquiry-based project learning has the potential to challenge kayako to readdress their roles and position themselves as co-researchers and collaborators alongside tamariki as they learn. The kayako participating in this research strive to honour children's ideas and working theories as a core aspect of their shared inquiries. We argue this approach provides a shared focus and sense of purpose that every member of the learning community can contribute to each day. And we think this is particularly significant given the complex challenges both families and early childhood teachers in the sector are currently navigating. We have discovered that the impact of prioritising collaborative inquiry results in unhurried time for tamariki to explore and develop working theories, and kayako who are supported to observe closely and to respond sensitively to children's ideas. I'll hand over to Yo.
Through the inquiries we observed, we have seen early childhood communities working and wondering together about what taonga can be found in their place, researching the histories and stories of their place, considering what connections can be made as they explore the places surrounding their setting, and thinking about how they can contribute to care for people. So there is a big emphasis in inquiry-based project learning on, whakapapa based projects. So as such, I've jumped a few lines, but as such, we suggest that when this approach is combined with a focus on place, it has the potential for both kaiako and tamariki to deepen their understandings related to the unique relationship that Māori have with the whenua and their cultural practices and preferences as tangata whenua. So, but there are some wonderings. And so some of my wonderings, like whilst we see these narratives collected, offer rich possibilities for conceptualising curriculum that honours the ideas of tamariki and values their interpretations and the possibilities. And we also recognise that there are many complexities at play here and that this is a pathway that must be navigated with care. So we also see a need for all moving parts in the education sector to be thinking in this space, and including the ministry, if any ministry people are here, initial teacher education providers, early childhood and all the sectors of education to work more cohesively in order to navigate these complexities and develop the capacity of kaiako to share information resources. So we've kind of got these questions, I don't have the answers, but I've got wonderings. We've got wonderings. How can early childhood guard against interactions that reproduce an imagined partnership between Māori and Pākehā, where teachers and students enact a bicultural narrative that maintains lopsided notions of partnership that advantage or advance Pākehā group interests? What role can inquiry-based project learning play in upholding bicultural expectations and the commitment held by te whāriki? Who benefits from inquiry-based project learning and how do we know? And those are examples of how kaupapa Māori theory can guide you in your practice, just as a little example of what it can do. And what are our next steps? And I'd like to finish by just talking about the title for this slide, E tu I mua o te rā. This is a concept I gained from Matua Hari Williams, our inaugural paiarahi at Unitec. It's about standing before the sun to face the day. And in so doing, you receive all the nourishment you need to be vital. So, if we stand before Te Whāriki in the same way to guide us in our practice, we can continue to seek out innovative approaches, unique and contextualised to our bicultural heritage, open to new possibilities as we stand to face the new.
Thank you very much. We've got 5 minutes for questions, actually. There are 2 questions online, so I'll just start with those. Somebody asks, the 6 participating EC services in phase 2, are they all kindergartens or early learning centres? Are there any Pacifica centres in Whangarei?
We're looking for participants if they're from one of those and would like to give us their name. We'll be in touch tomorrow.
It's a really good question, and I think one of the challenges is that we were conducting this research throughout COVID, which I wouldn't recommend. And I think as a team, we're incredibly grateful for the settings that did open their doors to us and allowed us in, because that took courage and also a lot of excitement for the project. So we're really grateful, but we're still looking for some pretty specific settings. Are there any questions from anyone here?
Thank you. There's one more online question actually. Mary Hardiman says, more of a statement that we as educators need to break down those barriers of holding their knowledge and strategies to spread the strategies which work and helping to adapt these to our own context and dynamics of teachers. We need to share together. Thank you for sharing this, and someone else's awesome presentation. Thank you.
We realised when we decided we would like to get really courageous and submit some abstracts to this conference that one of our participating centres was located in Waikato and has a really special history with this institute. So we thought we would invite them to present their journey with inquiry-based learning, and we're very keen to do that with all of our participating centres. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. At some point, I actually have just been at the Aotearoa New Zealand Art Educators Conference for a week, and we presented with daisies down there as well. It was really, I think you learn so much more from hearing the stories of incredible practitioners. So it's my delight to be able to introduce Lee and Michelle from Little Pumpkins to tell us their story.
Kia ora. Click through our ones if you like, or past our ones, yeah. Here is ours.
Kia ora tātou, ko rūpehu tū manga, ko whamanui te awa, Aotea te waka, ko Ngāti tūpoho te hapu, te ata haunui a paparangi te iwi, ko pūtiki wharenui te marae, e tipu aki au taupo, kei kirikiri roa ahau e nohoana, ko Michelle Tukuinwa.
Tēnā koutou, ko Tararua te manga, tō ohau te awa, ko Tainui te waka, ko Ngāti Raukawa ki te tonga tō iwi, ko Ngāti Tukorehi te hapu, ko Te Korehi te marae, ko Lee Taylor taku ingoa. I'm currently the company manager for Little Pumpkins Early Learning. We have 2 preschools, one in Tamahiri and one in Glenview. And so we're just going to share with you one of our projects. So how our journey began into inquiry-based learning, or what we call project work. In 1994, literally 1 year after Te Whāriki was published as a draft document, I was here at Waikato University doing my early childhood teacher training. And during my time here, I was introduced to the Reggio Emilia schools in Italy, and I was very, very interested. And so I went on to become the manager at Glenview and then the company manager for Little Pumpkins. And in 2009, I had the opportunity to go to Melbourne with Reggio Emilia Aotearoa New Zealand to do, they do a sort of a conference, and you can visit lots of different early childhood centres and schools over there. And I've actually been twice, I'm about to go for a 3rd time. Then we decided when we came back that we were going to, from then on, send 2 of our kaiko every year to Melbourne. And in 2014, Michelle went. So our approach in our preschools is very heavily influenced by the Reggio Emilia philosophy. We use environment as third teachers and provocations. So for us, this means a really aesthetically pleasing environment. We set up for small groups. Provocations are very carefully set up to provoke new ideas and theories. We have set criteria for provocations: literacy, mathematics, science, the arts, bicultural and multicultural lenses. We look at the image of the child as capable, curious, and we also explore the 100 languages. For us, this means listening to children and understanding that they have multiple ways of expressing themselves. We use the pedagogy of listening in our team, which means listening for children's questions and children's theories. We're prolific documenters. We document, and it is everywhere in our environment, on the walls, throughout our portfolios, and in our own personal inquiries. We use a Te Ao Māori worldview, and we use Te Whāriki as a base as well, and we have very strong links to our local curriculum. So when we started doing our inquiry work, or our project work, we really weren't really sure what we were doing, but we had a start. But over the years, this is the areas that we think benefit tamariki, klako and whānau. For tamariki, we see their individual strengths because it comes from a child's question. They naturally develop and collaborate into engineers. You'll see the manager of the group emerge, the mathematician, the artist, the social organiser. It comes directly from the children, and it allows them to have a safe space to share ideas and theories, and it builds confidence because in our centre there are no wrong answers. We celebrate diversity. For kaiako, it means that we allow them to fine-tune their listening and observation skills. It allows us to use our knowledge of children's development, and it builds teachers' intentional learning strategies. We spend a lot of time on intentional teaching strategies. It allows us to document as learning is unfolding, and it becomes a really fun and an exciting way to teach. For whānau and community, they can participate as much or as little as they feel comfortable. It gives a link between the centre and their home, because a lot of the conversations come back from home, and a lot of the conversations from the preschool end up back at home, and so you have new ideas and theories coming out. So it's a real extension of home and the world that the child comes from. The process. So what we do is we listen out for the child's question. In fact, this week, a child asked a question called
in Eels Dance.
An Eels Dance was this week's question.
Yeah.
So what we do is we come together during our staff meetings and we brainstorm all the possibilities and opportunities. Then we, at this point, decide on the teacher's research question, because we also research alongside the children. Then we go around our environment and we set it up as with different provocations. Then we document and we listen out for those new questions, and we use those questions to quickly change direction. So I'm going to hand over to Michelle to go through a project called Do Dinosaurs Hang Upside Down, which ended up becoming a study on perspectives.
So this is one of our very early projects that we did initially. It was a bit of a practice. This is Adam. So Adam asked this great question as he was using his tinana to imitate dinosaurs stomping and hanging and all sorts of things. And he asked us, do dinosaurs hang upside down? And when you know, and we knew that that was a great question. So do dinosaurs hang upside down? We talked about how we could find out through books, but they also decided to use Google. Google to children 10 years ago was pretty cool thing, and getting into the office was also a pretty cool thing to do. So through co-researching with them, we learned quite quickly that dinosaurs do in fact hang upside down, and our tamariki asked to represent their findings through art. Bats also featured in all this upside down talk, and we discovered that the long-tailed bats, or the peka live in our local gully system, which we visit quite regularly. It's just down the road from us, and we connected with the local group Project Echo. Still within the animal kingdom, our tamariki made a connection between bats and monkeys and decided to build a rainforest. We discovered that rainforests have layers, and through their developing social skills, they collaborated, discussed, theorised, and finally negotiated where the animals should live. And at this point, they realised that animals would see things differently from the treetops. The idea of perspectives inspired many of the provocations from here on in. Our tamariki wanted to see themselves upside down, so we did that. Kāko decided to give tamariki a new perspective of mahi toi by drawing underneath the tables. There was paper under there. Optical illusions involved both upside down and right side up, showing that different perspectives give different pictures or points of view. We looked at reflection and symmetry. We used mirrors, which allowed even our very young pipi to explore depth perception. We investigated inside out when we deconstructed an old DVD player to see what was inside. Yoga was already a feature of our curriculum back then, and our tamariki recognised that many upside down poses were used. We planted we talked about vegetables that grow above the ground and vegetables that grow under the ground. We planted tomatoes upside down. We planted in CD cases, and the vocabulary the children were using included lots of prepositions, so we made up a game where we also injected a little bit of te reo Māori into that too. We would ask children questions to hear their theories. We asked what would happen if the world was upside down. Some of their answers were the ships would go to the moon, the eagles would fly backwards, the plants won't grow because they can't grow down, and the ducks would fall down in the water and they can't breathe. We used mirrors to see above us by looking down, and that year we hung all our Christmas trees from the roof. That's just a real quick snapshot. Like, that project went for 6 months, and we've just picked out a few little things here. This shows a map of how we moved through the project. So every jump was triggered by some sort of springboard, such as a children's question or wondering, through co-research and provocations. And the movements we have mapped here are, just that they're a small part of what we did, really. And sometimes it went down, out, back, and up again. We just follow what they decide they want to learn. Projects in those days were documented in scrapbooks. This is Leah, who's she's 3.5 now, and she's the last of 8 who have come through, little pumpkins. So as she finds her āno in the pages of our puka puka, it allows us to not only make connections to home, but also to revisit the learning she's curious about.
So our documentation's evolved quite a lot. So between 2014 and 2018, we did a lot of scrapbooking. Michelle did it. And it had a huge amount of benefits because they would sit inside on the shelves for the children, and so the tamariki could just revisit their learning. And but the barrier was that it was very, very time consuming. So in 2018 onwards, we started to use Story Park, the program inside that, to document all our learning, and this had huge benefits for us. So the benefits were that we could layer publications over the top of our documentation. So now our documentation has te kōrero, he māpuna te tamaiti, te whāriki was always a feature right through our documenting, te ara pautama,
Te whatu pōkeka, when it applies.
But the barrier to using that is that it's not as accessible to tamariki and whānau, and the reason for that is we can make it accessible, but we also have our own reflections inside there, so the teachers will share articles and our reflections for our growth cycles as well. So I'll just give you a little snapshot. I won't go into too much depth into this, but this is how we document now. And this was actually after COVID, we decided to go right back to basics again and look at our Reggio Emilia inspired philosophy, because we had a lot of new team members.
This was just last year.
Yeah. So this is just different ways. We used te ara pautama and the evaluative set up through, yeah. I'll just pop myself through that. It just allows you, if you look at that we've got different, every piece of, every time a whānau came into the centre, we recorded it as well and had photographs. So it's really pages and pages, and when you print it, it's a lot of work. You can just see. And we set it up quite differently. Some years it's set up differently.
Yeah, depending on what our focus is and what our goals are, depends on how we set up the project. This is Pippa. Pippa's mum works here somewhere. So just to finish off, we've got a little whakatauki here that we think applies to us as a team. E hara taku toa, e te toa, takitahi, engari ke he toa, takitini. So we basically work as a team and we learn from each other, and we all make mistakes, and we all, we backtrack and come back around again. And
we're very fortunate that we've worked together for a very, 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 very long time. And we've got, our little Glenview Centre's only got 31 tamariki, predominantly Māori, Pacifica, English as second language, or children with special needs, and all of our kaiako are qualified teachers, and we've worked together.
Yeah, we've got
way too long.
One's been with us 20 years, I've been there 13 and you've been there 100.
It still looks great for over 100 years old.
That's our presentation.
Thank you so much. So it was really super interesting. And online that people are saying, amazing learning experiences, come by, and thank you for sharing. Are there any questions from anyone?
You're welcome. Come and visit us if you want to. It's the best way to find out stuff.
This team, would you like to come in? Oh, no, sorry. This team. We're a new adopted team. It's just you, but there were others. And, oh yeah, you were there. Would you like to comment on anything? You've got a bit of time.
I just think it's amazing, really, that today has been that collaborative mix of, sector people from right the way from face-to-face teaching with children to tertiary and our future teachers, etc., universities, and we've got the very real, reason as to why we're all, coming together, really. So I think seeing an inquiry from teachers' perspectives and from the research is just, so valuable.
Yes.
And credit to Michelle and Lee, because
amazing
what
job.
an amazing job.
Yeah, we're only here because of your overview. They said they actually said we had to go and share what we were doing with the rest of the community and other children. So we were like,
and they're not really, it's
okay.
all the beginning, really, they don't know that.
They did too good a job, you
I guess
see.
you get used to it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And for us as well, Sarah's been the lead in the project, Sarah Probine, and she's just been absolutely, it is Sarah's background passion and everything else, so it's been a pleasure to be part of this.
Yeah, it's really useful to see the actual projects. That's really I think one of the things we found from this research is what incredible work is happening, but not everyone knows about it, and that's really problematic. So I think the next step for our research is to really make this visible and share this with early childhood teachers all across Aotearoa.
Yeah, I had a problem with my students, with the graduate diploma students. They have an assignment where they've done a project and then they need to set up in their centre during their cusp session a provocation. But some of them come and say, oh no, our centre doesn't allow us to do provocations.
My students have to do a full inquiry-based
And so, okay. So yeah, that's
that can be a real barrier.
It's a shame. It's a shame. Our kaiako have responsibility for everyone's got their own provocation space they're responsible for.
But it's just a shame that there's centres who don't see obviously don't see the value of it at all.
So spread around.
I have a question. So with regards to provocations in Te Ao Māori, how do you provoke if the knowledge, if the provocation is coming from the tamariki and if the children do not have prior knowledge in that space, how do you incorporate a te ao Māori view around the mahi that you do? How does that come in?
Most of our children do have knowledge of te ao Māori because that's what we teach in our everyday.
Both centres? Oh.
In our everyday lives, as you know, there's lots and lots of cultural practice happening. That question, can the eels dance, came from a te ao Māori publication around the star whāriki. Yeah, so that's where that came from.
Does that come from the child, or does that come from what you as kaiako bring in?
So we'll set it up just to provoke an idea, and then we'll listen for the children's questions. This little Tamaiti has said, you know, do eels dance? So we've come
we'll
together.
Take that and move on with that. Then that becomes the
we did a lot of we went, we were very fortunate, we did through Te Rito Maiha a big tour of Waikato, but one of the challenges was to get out and go and explore our local area, and we went down, because we're right by where the bridge is coming across, so we found out that the hangi, the food pits were being dug up, and
all the waterways around us were used as like a fridge, so they used to build their pātaka in the streams to keep the kai cold. I had no idea that happened. We knew that they used to eat the peka that we now, you know, are endangered. They used to smoke them out of the trees and eat them. We've learned, we connect to our local curriculum as much as we can anyway. Yeah, but you've got to find that key person in the community that can give you the information. That can be hard.
And you said there was a high, most of your children are Maori Pacific, yeah?
And
but if you were in a very Pākehā centre, that would be even harder to connect with Te ao Māori, yeah?
So Julie and I are curriculum leads with the Ministry of Education here, and there's 3 around most of the country. So
come visit.
Yeah, we work predominantly in spaces where there are high Māori, and also I think your Glenview Centre. Yeah, so
we're a dying breed there. We're literally on a ticking time, because we're located, we've got 5 hectares of land, but it's not ours, it's actually leased land from Transit New Zealand. So eventually one day it's going to be a road. And we know there's a bridge coming through. We didn't know whether it was going to come straight through us or but it's being built further down. So we're safe for about another decade. But so it's tiny. We're 31 children. We're literally a dying.
We have 6 staff, and we're all qualified too. So
well, there's 7 because we got part-timers.
I think that makes a difference in terms of how well you work together, and the knowledge that. The theory behind the knowledge, makes a big difference.
We'll be in touch.
We've gotten better at it over the years. We were that bicultural, I don't think 10 years ago, but our very first project.
We're very fortunate. Emily is quite fluent in Te Reo as well.
But our very first project, I think, what sparked my own interest was we had a wharenui built from recycled remu from Hayes Paddock, actually. One of our dads built it, and the kids thought it was a bus shelter. And we were like, we need to do some work around here. So we had this big official opening, and we invited people, and
Michelle went down to the local marae and knocked on the door, and
they came in, and that was a huge learning thing for us. So we kind of just carried on from there. Really.
Quite different communities, coming here.
Yeah, very much.
Yes, very much, yeah.
Any question? Just how do you, what you've done with the dinosaurs hanging upside down or the eels dancing, whatever, how do you summarise that and put it together as a story to pass back to families involved, to future teachers you may be employing, to anybody else? Have you sort of brought it together somehow?
Well, the scrapbook, which is in my car, I knew I should have bought it. Shows that journey and shows the shifts all the way through. Sometimes our projects don't end up being what they think they are. I think the one after that we looked at sustainability, but we looked at, there's only so many ways to recycle, right? So we looked at cultural sustainability, social sustainability, and environmental sustainability. And that ended up being a project on olden days, because of the way we followed the children, and that's the way it should be. So,
totally.
yeah, but True, the scrapbooks were great,
Yeah.
loved them, but a lot of work and you've got to gather stuff over the year in one place and put it all together at the end. We can show them our story park stuff, but like Lee said, a lot of our professional growth cycles are also linked to our projects. PD is targeted to the project for the year. So there's a lot of teacher stuff.
Yeah, new kaiako coming in, they're linked into it, so they get access to it, but our whānau, it's really documentation on what we document around.
So they get it through their portfolios, any celebrations we have over the year, whatever's on the wall, we try and keep what's on the wall up to date and current, so our families know what's happening. Yeah, but we don't do the scrapbooks like we used to. They were my favourite. I would much rather be doing them, but I think with the expectations of implementing
so many
different publications now into your work is kind of...
Every publication we've managed to find a way to now implement it into our projects.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure if it's a question, it's just more probably an observation. Like you mentioned that some students going out, it's not what we do at our centre, and just kind of what you've said, Sarah, is it's really obvious that it's not necessarily practice for every place and space.
No.
What I guess the question is, what's being done or what could be done to support the growth of those practices and that rich pedagogy that you guys have tapped into. Because I'm thinking if I'm a new kaiako coming into a centre, I have to akana there. I can learn about how it effectively works, but that's obviously not happening everywhere, right?
No, that's why we as a research team are thinking about developing resources and publications that are really going to support kaiako here to make those connections to te whāriki and bicultural practice and localised curriculum. Because that's what we've found, is that inquiry is being used as a vehicle to connect with space and place. But there's just not a lot out there, so
I think you need the people in the places. Like there's nothing like learning from a person. Like we all get books, but how often do we implement what we read books into practice? You need the people.
Both our Tamahiri centres and our Glenview centres, we've got all qualified teachers and really good ratios, and we've actually, at both Tamahiri and Glenview, we've been together a lot of our kaiako have been together a really long time, like well over a decade. And then we've got a few new grads that have come in as well, and they just love.
They just learn
alongside us. So they've got really good role models, but I think if we had a total change of, you've got to get people up to speed, and that's a lot of energy, particularly when you're battling with everything else on top of it.
And I think that comes through in degree programs, that's where it needs to really start, is within the degree programs. And that's where they'll get their fire and their spark from. Plus a visit to Melbourne.
So we've got an inquiry-based whole paper dedicated to inquiry-based learning on our degree now, so we're trying.
Yeah, that's cool.
Okay, well, it's time to now go through to the other room for the plenary session. So thank you very much.